Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Bruce Eckfeldt. I'm a strategic coach. We're running LinkedIn Live today. I'm going to do a little intro on our topic. I'm going to introduce our guest, our panelists, and then we're going to dive into it. We're going to be on here for about a half an hour. And if anyone here is on LinkedIn, this is live. We are going to monitor the chat and the comments. If you have a question or something you want to throw into the chat there, we'll all try to watch that as we go. We'll try to address those as they come up. If you happen to be on YouTube, jump over to LinkedIn if you want to make a comment. That's the channel we're going to monitor there. If you happen to be watching to the replay, we will be checking the comment section of this event in the coming days and weeks here. So if you're watching this later and you have a comment, throw it in there. I'll try to watch that and I'll try to get back to you on there too. So even if you're not live here, throw the comments in there. So with all that, our topic today is really understanding mastering the art of confident presentations. We're going to kind of touch on this from various aspects, but I find that this is a really important and critical aspect of executive performance, of leadership, is being able to present, whether it's formally in front of the stage or whether it's just in the office, in the boardroom. These are all important ways of communicating and presenting. So we're going to talk about that. Again, my name is Bruce Eckfeldt. I'm a strategic coach. I work with leadership teams around strategy and growth and exits. And we have two wonderful guests today, fellow panelists here. I'm going to introduce quickly. John Bowe is a speech and presentation expert, has over 26 years of experience helping leaders communicate effectively. Drawing on ancient rhetoric techniques, he empowers speakers to enhance clarity, confidence, and impact. The author of I Have Something to Say. John's works are featured in outlets The New York Times and The New Yorker. With that, John, welcome to the program.
Hey, Bruce. Thanks a lot for coming, both of us.
Yeah, thank you for being on. And Joel Dolce is our second one. He is founder of Joel Dolce Communications, specializes in media training, presentation coaching. Background is an editor-in-chief of Details magazine. Joe helps CEOs and leaders craft memorable messages, navigate tough questions, captivate audiences with confidence. And welcome, Joe.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, it's a pleasure having you. So with that, let's kind of get into a first question, just kind of kick things off, and we're going to let the conversation go where it is. Again, if you have comments or things that you want us to cover, throw it in the chat. We'll monitor that. But my first question to each of you, and I'll give you each a second to just kind of answer this one. What do you think most people struggle with in presenting effectively? Like, as professionals, having worked with many executives, leaders, like, what are some common things or what are the biggest challenges that you feel people have? Let's start with John and then we'll go to Joe.
Okay. I mean, my whole thing that I always say is you spend so many years in school learning how to write, and you know all the different moving parts of written language, right? You know, capital letter, you know, verb, subject. And with speech, you get nothing.
Yeah.
Like, none of us knows anything about the different parts of speech. You can't look at someone else's presentation really and have any kind of vocabulary for describing what was good or bad. So the main thing we struggle with is we've never been taught to do it. You know, so you have no method. Everyone's just winging it. And then wondering, like, why isn't this easier? Why do I suck at this? You know,
is this kind of the people tend to speak like they write, and they haven't really figured out how they want to speak. Like, what is the art of speaking?
Kind of, or I think they speak like they write their slides. You know what I mean? Most people are just kind of parroting what's on their slides and thinking, like, oh, I guess I'm supposed to make this be live through my body.
Yeah.
But there's no method. There's no understanding of what you're really supposed to be doing. So people struggle with all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Joe, what are your thoughts?
Two things. Exactly what John said. But to me, it's confidence and competence, really. Without confidence, you're weak. You feel like you're flubbing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And without having a playbook on how to put it together, knowing that the most important thing is how to connect with an audience, and then using certain techniques of communication to, in fact, connect with that audience, that's a major life lesson. And it's a constant learning, really. How do you wake them up? How do you wake up a group of 100, 200, or even a small group of 2 people? How do you wake them up and get them on to pay attention to what you're doing?
Yeah. I would say that's the biggest one, both my own experience and with the leaders I work with, is this idea of connecting, right? And whether it's, before the event, is deciding, like, what is it? Like, what do you want them to feel? Because people spend so much time on the content. It's like, okay, what do I want to say? and not really thinking about, okay, well, what do I want them to hear? What do I want them to feel, more importantly?
And how do I enable them to hear?
Yeah.
Right. You have to look, to me, it's an act of seduction.
Ooh, okay.
It is. It's
Yeah.
like the whole presentation is a constant flirt. You know, if you get what you want at the end, all right, you got the date. But without the seduction, it's not gonna, you can't just show up and say, listen to me. I have something to tell you. It doesn't work.
So I'm going to do the rest of my conversation in the
right? We have these weapons of mass distraction, right?
Yeah.
These are far more compelling than you having to show up and listen to what I'm going to say.
And so do we have to compete with that? Like, do you feel like people's, like the whole presentation strategy has changed now, that because people's minds have shifted in terms of how they actually consume information, and the fact that we have these devices that gives us, you know, all the content that we want immediately?
I think it's a great question. And I think the answer is indubitably, yes.
Yeah.
Of course.
Sure, you definitely, people have
what's vying for your attention all the time, right? And we only have a limited amount. We can't be all places at once with our attention.
Yeah.
John, what were you saying?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the term connection, when I first started doing this stuff, I heard that again and again. You know, you really need to connect with your audience. And I was like, okay, note to self, connect to audience. And what I didn't know is that there are 100 different ways you can do that. It's not just like emoting like Tony Robbins or something, and I'm this fabulous, charismatic, warm person, and you're just going to love me and do whatever I tell you to do. It's breaking your ideas into pieces that other people can understand. It's not talking about the metric system when you're talking to an American audience that's thinking about inches. It's not talking about inches when you're talking to an audience that uses the metric system.
Yeah.
You know, it's just breaking down everything into the language of your audience as much as possible. And that is a huge part of it right there. That covers a lot of ground.
I like to give people ways to practice, right? Mm-hmm. So I'll generally offer a few ideas. Like when you're starting a presentation, that's the most important thing, right? If you don't get them at the front, you're really not going to get them at the end. Mm-hmm. You're certainly not going to get them in the hammock part where, you know, people really lose attention in the middle. So can you start with a counterintuitive fact? Can you tell a short story that sort of telescopes to your theme? Can you ask a really interesting question, not just a stupid question that everybody in the audience already knows the answer to? You know, what are some of these techniques to really get people to open up and open their minds? And they work. They really work. But you have to practice them. You have to do them. It's not just, here's the thing. You cannot read a book, sorry, John, about being a good presenter. You have to do it. It is absolutely something that happens in real time, generally with somebody who's giving you good feedback, right? No amount of analysis or reading about techniques is going to do it.
Yeah. I always say you don't learn to swim by standing on the side of the pool.
Exactly right.
Reading about swimming theory.
Yeah,
I mean, you know what Joe is saying, like you got to get them at the beginning. Sometimes it's just a matter of saying hi. You would not believe the number of presentations I hear where people just sort of jump into it and they turn their back to the audience and they start reading from their slides. So that's the opposite of what you should do. So just to start things, hi, I'm going to talk about such and such. Here's why I think you might care. Here's how I hope, you know, here's what's in it for you. Here's how I'm going to talk. Here's sort of like a table of contents. I'll talk for 18 minutes and then turn it back to you. So if you say, I'm going to talk for 18 minutes about these three things, it sets their expectations. Mm-hmm. And they know that you're not just going to sit there and prattle and that they're going to be like in this silent battle with you to withstand this deluge of data that you're going to throw at them.
Yeah. So I remember one of the first things at a speech coach for a while, or a speaking coach, and first thing to do is had me slow down. So I was so focused on just getting information out. And they're like, wait, hold on. Like you are not giving people a chance to actually absorb anything you're saying.
And here's the other thing. Like, I think there's a lot of social science that backs this up, is that people only take away 3 things. Like, they're not going to take away 100 things. So flooding them with information and facts and details and, you know, metrics is in a way counterproductive.
Yeah.
People can only absorb so much.
Yeah. How about there's a phrase that I don't know who says it, or I'd be apocryphal if I really figured it out, was, you know, people don't remember what they say. They remember how you make them feel. Like, how does this whole kind of, you know, the content or the objective content of what you're saying versus the way in which you say it and the kind of the emotion in which you deliver it. Like, how do you I guess what's the strategy there? How do you differentiate that, or how do you approach that with the people you work with?
I mean, Joe, your answer to this is going to be more interesting than mine, because most of my clients are finance people. And so how do they want their audience to feel? It's not a super touchy-feely kind of a vibe that they're putting down. So it really comes down to like competence. I'm here. I'm not crazy. I'm not full of weird, distracting details. It's not, I'm going to love you a long time and we're going to go off into the sunset together. You know what I mean? It's pretty cut and dry, but still, you do need to pay attention to it, even if it is pretty proscribed like that. I am here. I know you care about your money. I know you don't want to lose your investment. I'm on top of it. That might be.
But I think that's how you want to make them feel. Right? I think you want them to be felt confident, trustworthy. They're an expert in the space. They know what they're doing. They're not going to screw up. They're not going to do my. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'd want an advisor who I'm like, oh my gosh, can we go out on a date after this? Right? Like, it's just not the right feel.
Well, could be. It depends on the advisor. But I also think that you want somehow to convey that you are an expert in what you're talking about, right? You don't want to be selling. I don't think that works anymore. I'm currently working with a sales team actually to help them. And there's actually a lot of interesting social science about what really works. And what it's coming down to is you really want the people you're trying to persuade, you want to teach them. You want them to know that you know more about this than they do. And that's quite interesting when you start thinking about that. But I think you want people to feel that you're human, that you're vulnerable, that you have a basis for what you're speaking about. Right. And that's a whole bunch of subtle cues. Sometimes it can also be about what you're saying, but how do you comport yourself? How do you stand on that stage? When you do make a mistake, because everybody does at some point, how do you grapple with it? You okay with it? I mean, you have to be okay with it because everybody does. There's no such thing as a perfect anything.
Yeah.
So
I find it's less about the mistake and more about how you deal with it.
Absolutely.
Right. In fact, sometimes a well-timed mistake and a very good recovery can have a huge impact on an audience.
The best laughs I've ever gotten were when I screwed something up and I made some self-deprecating joke that was completely unplanned and people go nuts because I clearly don't take myself that seriously. And they like that.
Yeah, I think so too. And I also think a little modesty. Look, nobody ever liked the smartest person in the schoolroom, right? So when people are trying to get up there and convince you how smart they are, sort of a turnoff at this point, right? Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about strategy and approach here. Like when you're working with somebody on whether it's a specific presentation or a speech or something, or just helping them with their sort of day-to-day presentation skills. I guess where do you start? Do you start on content? Do you start on delivery? Do you figure out strategy? Kind of curious for each of you, how you kind of break down the process a little bit.
I'll start.
Go for it.
It really depends on the client and the client's needs. I ask people to do a pre-session assessment, self-assessment, and they're pretty revealing about it. And they'll tell me where they think their challenges are. So I like to address them. But I really don't think that any amount of delivery will help you if your content isn't good. I just have to say that.
Yeah.
And I like to co-create. If people need my help to work on the content, I like to co-create it with them. I used to write stuff for people. And I learned over time that really the major work in that was getting them to take what I've written and get it into their voice. Yeah. So it's much more effective. It's much more efficient to actually co-create it with them. And then we try it out. Get them comfortable with content first. Then we talk about delivery, right? Mm-hmm. How do you use your voice? When to pause? You're going too quickly. How do you stand? Mm-hmm. How do you move across the room to indicate a break of theme and change all that? That's what works. Seems to work best with me. John, what about you?
Yeah, I do the same thing every single time. Doesn't matter who it is or what the venue is or what the thing is. I'll start. There's something from Aristotle that is my Bible. It's everything. And he said, the audience is the beginning and the end of public speaking. And so most people go into a presentation, they've got this huge data set, whether it's an investment or a company or invention or whatever. And I'm like, great, who are you telling? Who are you talking to? So if they're talking to sixth graders or if they're talking to billionaires or whatever, they've got to think that through. and think through what the audience cares about, what they need, what are their expectations for this meeting. Because if you go there with a whole encyclopedia worth of stuff and just dump it on them, that's horrible. So everything Joe said about you got to get the content right before you start messing around with the delivery stuff. For me, the way to get the content right is figure out, well, if you're encyclopedia, which 2 pages are you here to talk about?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can start messing with, well, what do you want these people to get out of the talk? That's the real focus that limits everything you're going to say. And then you start breaking it out and writing it, and then you start focusing on how to deliver it.
Yeah. How does kind of the delivery format change things for you, right? Like whether you're, on stage, and there's a very kind of strong distinction between speaker and audience, physically lighting everything versus, okay, I'm in a more casual kind of boardroom, or, I'm definitely speaking in the audience, but it's, versus something like Zoom where it's like, okay, well, I'm on stage. Like, I don't even know who the audience is. I can't see them. I can't interact. Like, what is what comes up in terms of how you approach it, or sort of techniques that you use, or how do you sort of strategize given those situations?
You could think about big room, small room, Zoom, right? Big room, small room, screen, if you will.
Yeah.
So big room, you have more you can do with your body. You can use that stage as a space and work on that. You can also, you have a choice. Do you want to stand at a podium, or do you want to not be blocked? I tend to like no blocking. I tend to like full body exposure. When I'm leading a panel or doing a presentation, I actually like to leave the stage, walk through the audience. I find that surprise is a really nice thing, no matter what it is you're doing. So that helps. That really breaks down that barrier sometimes. In a small room, you can use your body a bit more. If you have something important to say, you can lean on the table. I actually show people how to do this stuff. Take a sip of water at a certain time, at a dramatic moment. You don't always have to use these dramatic techniques, but sometimes it's nice to have them in your arsenal, in your tool chest, when you need to, wake people up and snap. The screen is obviously the most limited, but there are certain things you can do with your hands, like numbers. If it's really important, get a little closer. It's a little more limited, but you have to change it up a little bit more. Use some slides, use your body, use your voice in different ways.
Yeah, John, thoughts on this?
I mean, exactly what Joe said, A, and B, for a big audience, you look at stand-up comedians, for example, how they'll sort of, if it's a big stage, they'll be, for the first part of their story, they'll be here. The second part of the story, they might be over on this side, and maybe they'll end it by being in the middle. Doesn't really matter what order maybe, but you want everyone in the audience to feel like you were including them. And I think if you block a speaker out and get them to walk through those paces, there's less chance that they'll freeze up when they're delivering and just stand in one place, which is horrible. I think Toastmasters had something great about this. They said, and this is really the same as what Aristotle said in fancier words, but basically you want your gestures and your body movement and your voice to enhance your message and never distract from it, which is a great rule. So if you're on a big stage, behave accordingly. If you're on a Zoom meeting, behave accordingly. So still now, however many years after virtual meetings, you still have people where the sunlight is streaming in behind them and making a third of their face not visible, or the sound will be terrible. There'll be a siren going off. People are very unconscious about when they share screens. And so they'll begin the meeting with screen share on. And so they're just like this little, I'm trying to get this right on my screen. They'll be like this little head at the corner of it. Please give me $20 million for my invention, even though you can't see my face. It's you need to know when you're big and when you're small. And when you're saying something important to the audience, at least, stop screen sharing for a minute so that they can just see you.
Yeah, I always love the confidential informant mode. You can't even see it. I'm actually bemoaning the fact that I left the light on behind me, so I'm trying to cover it.
Yeah, you're in big trouble.
You both mentioned this kind of the slides. I mean, this is going to be it can be a painful discussion because I've seen it done so poorly so many times. Like in terms of visuals, let's kind of categorize it as visuals. How do you approach kind of visuals or the material that is displayed, whether it's on on the stage, whether you've got a screen or whether you're in a boardroom and you've got a screen or you've got handouts or, on Zoom, obviously screen sharing and things like that. Like, what are some general strategies or things that you advise folks on how to use visuals and supporting documentation as part of presentations?
I always tell people, first of all, cut it by 80%. Whatever you think was right, cut it by 80% because you messed up already. There's so much information on the slide. And I said, no, you email that stuff to people.
Yeah.
You don't saddle yourself with the task of having to present all this stuff or even service it or relate to it. It's too much. So I work with a lot of people that have 3 or 4 different kind of graphs and pie charts, different kind of infographics on one slide. And I tell them that's like 3 minutes for an audience to sit there and just pierce what is going on with that slide. So that's 3 minutes when they're not listening to you at all. So just make it simple. Have one idea per slide. There's something called visual hierarchy. So if you look at any good painting, the artist knew where your eye is going to fall. And it's not necessarily upper left going like a book, but it's somewhere, and then they know where you're going to look next and next. Do that a little bit with your slides, even if you're not a famous painter. Just don't assume that everyone's going to be able to catch up to your slides and listen to you at the same time. So those are a couple of basic tips. Number 3 being, don't ever turn your back to your audience and start reading off your slides, because then
I like slides to if they have to show information, they have to show information, but I like them to also help you to think laterally. What I don't like is anybody who reads a slide, because it's first of all, I can read that slide in 3 seconds where it takes you 3 minutes to present it. So you've lost the audience almost immediately, right? You've taken the drama away from the slide if there's a lot of text and you're reading it exactly. I do like it when it can sort of laterally get you to think about something else. I also, I'm a fan of not starting with slides in the creation process, probably because I'm a writer and I like to weave a story. I think slides can limit your thinking sometimes, that it has to be chunked in a particular way. So I like to get people to talk me through the entire thing first, and then we go back and we stick in the slides where appropriate, or sometimes where inappropriate, again, just to spark some surprise or some interest there. I work with a lot of people who are pitching new businesses for money, and they tend to really overload slides, just as John was saying, with such density, like impossible to read graphs and charts and everything you can imagine. And I find it really works against them. It creates confusion rather than clarity. And that's the thing.
Yeah.
A good presentation, it is rehearsed a lot. And it is rehearsed a lot in front of a whole bunch of different people, right? Like, so the average number of hours to do a TED Talk, an 18-minute TED Talk, the old-fashioned, old-school way, was 100 hours of rehearsal.
Wow.
So I'm not expecting anybody to do 100 hours of rehearsal, but you really learn what's clear and what's confusing when you run it and run it and run it to people who are not in your organization, who don't work for you, and who can tell you the truth. And ultimately, this is going to sound like a really smarmy sales pitch, but that is why you have a coach.
Yeah.
Is to get that outside feedback, or we can organize a group of people for you to come and give it to. So it's not just my opinion. It's how are you connecting? It all comes back to that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. I was going to say on the slides, the one thing I always try to do is, like, can you explain what you're trying to say without the slide?
Yeah.
Right. And if we can do that without the slide, don't do that. And if we need the slide, then what do we actually need the slide for? And can we reduce the slide down to that essence? Like, if you're trying to, like, sometimes it's like, okay, there's actually a complicated model here or something, or we're explaining some process and I need to have, but what are the minimum number of things I need on the slide to explain that process?
Yeah.
I find that helps me not create a visual that's actually going to distract people from what I'm trying to say, and it's actually going to support it. Then the text thing is, I generally don't like any text on a slide.
Yeah.
And if you do have text on a slide, I actually do want to read it, because I want to, because they're going to read it, but I want to read it for them to help them understand, like, why I have this text on a slide. So I may, just mention the title. Okay, so this is a slide on ABC. Now the key things here are A over here, and then B, and then C. Like, because I don't want them trying to read on their own, because now we're creating this. They're trying to read. They're trying to listen. They're doing neither of them very well. The whole art of visual slides and things like that is another area we get into.
Yeah, it's fast. It's really interesting. But I think the goal is to keep the attention on the speaker, not on the slide.
Exactly.
The slide should be your backup. Should be your your ancillary stuff.
Yeah.
I always tell people you're the star, not your deck. And so, Joe, what you said about not starting with the slides from the beginning, you want a few seconds or a minute or something for the speaker to just establish some rapport with the audience before cutting to that thing. Because to go back to what we were talking about before with screens win out over people anytime. Go by any sports bar.
Yeah.
Everyone's looking at the game.
Yeah, I can't go to a bar and have a conversation with someone if there's screens in the background. I'm just like,
it's true.
It's just totally impossible. Joe, you mentioned some of the tools and techniques of being able to kind of review and improve. I must say one of the most amazing processes I went through was having myself recorded speaking and then watching it myself. And I was like, oh, okay, now I understand everything that everyone's been telling me about things. Yep. But it can go either way. Like, what are some tools like this or techniques, whether it's, having audience, mock audiences or recording, what are some techniques that you use to help develop the process, give people feedback and improve their skills around speaking?
Well, let's elevate the screen here. You can use these things and they are great coaches. Mm-hmm. Okay. When you look at yourself, you're going to see all, I know this because when I do training with people, I start out iPads taping them, right? We just do a 3 or 4 minute thing and then we review it together. And let me tell you, I rarely have to say anything. Most people are acutely critical of watching themselves on a screen, okay? And it's all writ large right there. You know where you're tense, where you're anxious. You know what is going to get in the way of that connection, that all important connection. So that is one thing, is to use your phone as a coach or use your iPad as a coach.
Yeah.
I think that's a very important one, actually. And then I forgot your question, so I can't answer anymore.
No, that's fine. John, what are some things that you do to help people with getting feedback?
I mean, I think one of the great things, like timing yourself. Most people are really worried that they're going to go on too long. So if you time yourself and you see, oh, this is 7 minutes, this is 9 minutes, I'm supposed to be doing this for 4 minutes, you can get yourself to the place you want to be before you do it, so you're not paranoid. That's one thing. Another thing, the more you repeat it, the more you hear phrases that are just horrible. I mean, the number of people who say, I'm really thrilled to be here today to talk to you about the increased EBITDA we have. You're not thrilled. Either change the word thrilled or be thrilled, but like those have to line up. And so people do that all the time, where they have phrases, they'll say about 5 or 6, half a dozen. And it's like, no, say 6. You just saved 12 syllables. Yep. And so just thing by thing by thing, you get it so that your performance is finally straightforward. It's not about being charismatic. Again, it's just about ironing out all the crap and the bloat so that you are clear.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I love about Toastmasters and these organizations, where it's like, it's just really like track everything and you get a lot of data coming out of this.
If you're the person with 27 filler words and the other people around you have 3 and 5, and you're like the one who's like, that happens maybe twice before you're just never again going to be that person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The other one I saw, I had someone do this for me. It was fascinating, is recording and then watch it with the sound off.
Oh, that's interesting too.
And and you start catching all of these little visual things that you do, that like little ticks that you have, ticks that you have, patterns. That's a fascinating, and it's interesting to give it to someone that hasn't seen it. You have someone watch it without the sound off, and you ask them, "What do you think you're talking about?" Or what is the energy that you're giving? And
what's the feeling you're emoting? Yeah, exactly. I will say also, when I do workshops, I like to do a feedback process. So when somebody gets up and does something, I do like to ask the group, what did X do well? What could X do better? And there's a lot of great information there, because this is people just responding. And it's very valuable, and it really adds a whole ton of dimension to a workshop when you're doing that kind of thing.
Yeah. We're going to hit time here. I want to give you each kind of a last question, and then you can give people information on how to get a hold of you. I guess when would you advise somebody look at getting a coach or assistance and helping with them? Like what kind of situation or what kind of professional or what kind of person? I'll let you each go, and then you can give contact information for how people can get a hold of you. So John, why don't we start with you?
Okay. I mean, I think given the fact that most people don't have any training, it's great to hire a trainer for a couple of hours just to find out what are the issues, what are some basic techniques for me to do this better. I mean, the way that I teach it, and probably most coaches, you can take a little bit of this and then keep on learning on your own.
Yeah.
So I just think basic competency is a great goal. Obviously, if you're a founder, if you're an executive, your speeches, your presentations really, really count. There's a ton at stake. You have to get it right. You can't just suck at this. You can't just wing it and hope that it's going to be great. So, I've seen in the last decade or so more and more coaching just seems to be so much more accepted for any little thing. People get coached on all kinds of things that they didn't used to. So it's less weird than it used to for people to just reach out and realize, oh, I've never had any help with this. There's no way I'm getting promoted and bumping up the next couple layers of management unless I get pretty competent at this.
Yeah.
Where to find me? I am at johnfbo.com. And, you can always find me through that. Thanks very much, Bruce.
Yeah. I would say that it's useful. I want people to have fun when they're doing this. I think it's a great opportunity to be able to spread your ideas, your service, your product into the world. If you have something you want to say, get good at it.
Yeah.
Because it's an increasingly valued format. We're obviously using oral, O-R-A-L, and A-U-R-A-L much more today than ever before. We have many more means to do it. But if you can have fun doing it, and if the fun is through a little confidence and a few techniques, and go for it. I think it's worth doing. Here's the thing: no one gets worse. I guarantee it. Okay, no one will get worse after working for 2 hours with me or John or you, Bruce. So. Yeah. I say go it. It makes if you can do it.
Yeah.
I'm at Joe Dolce Communications. It's my name, Joe DOLCE.com, and you'll find me. Or if you call John, he'll turn you on to me, or turn you on to
vice versa.
Perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. Yeah, I would say the one thing my personal experience is I had some coaching done when I had to give some big presentations and stuff. But I realized the real impact was everything else, right? Like just how I showed up, even in one-on-one employee meetings, right? Like being able to communicate effectively and actually engage and deliver content, not just informationally, but, from really landing messages and connecting with folks was huge.
It's satisfying. It's strangely satisfying. I'm sure some neuroscience can say there's an endorphin serotonin release that happens, but it is truly satisfying.
I mean, most people feel that they mean something and their words and their ideas mean something. So before I got to be any good at this, I would do readings for my books and stuff, and it never meant anything. I couldn't bring it. I couldn't make it happen, but I was smart and I had ideas. I just couldn't make it happen. I feel like most people are like that. Most meetings during the day, they want what they said to come across and make sense. That's it. It's nothing more than that.
Yeah. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. I'm going to make sure all of our contact information is in the on LinkedIn. You can get to all of us on the LinkedIn website, and I'll make sure that in the comments we've got contact information. Thank you so much for taking the time today. Great conversation. Absolute pleasure. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Both of you as well. Thanks.
Thank you.